It's Spoilerin time. This is the show made possible by our other show, Cordkillers. Cordkillers, we learn how to watch things, what the devices are and the services, and then we watch them and we talk about them here. This week, we're going to spoil you on The Larry Sanders Show, episodes 1 and 2 of season 4, What We Do in the Shadows, a season recap bringing you up from episode 1 of season 2 through episode 5 of season 2, and the 7th episode of season 4 of Rick and Morty. I'm Tom Merritt. He's Brian Brushwood.
Heck yeah, man. Dude, do we have an order already established, or can we dive in?
Oh, we have Rick and Morty up top. Did you want to change that order?
No, that's fine. We'll talk about Rick and Morty. I feel guilty, Tom, because second episode in a row, mid-season break, first episode, I felt like I'm a bad person just because it's an anthology episode. And what I really enjoy is sort of seeing the bigger arc of all these characters. And last week we talked about, because it's an anthology, because they went out of their way to constantly be shouting, none of this counts, none of this is real or whatever. They kind of did the same thing on this. Now, in a reverse way, they went very, very deep on one sideways story. The story was not about Rick and Morty or any of our favorite characters. I was fine with all of that. But like at some point, even Morty, I think, says, what's the point of all this? Did we learn or grow? Why did we do this? And then, and again, it felt like kind of the same note they hit last week, which I didn't love. And to be honest, I watched it last night and I thought, probably just because I'm not in the right headspace, watched it again this morning, still felt the same way. It felt fairly pointless and meandering. And now there was depth on the alien side, but that was a fine short story that for some reason happened to be in a Rick and Morty episode.
I liked when Summer was brought in, when we found out they had left Summer behind. Up until then, I was like, all right, we're doing a lot of self-referential stuff here.
It's like 16 minutes in, Tom.
But okay.
It was over. Half the episode was over.
And so, yeah, your description of it as a short story is fairly apt, because then when we had Summer, I'm like, oh, now we're going to get it all told from a different angle. This is interesting. There's more story than I expected here. This is fun. And I enjoyed the second half quite a bit. Did you stick around for the post-credit scene? Not that it was.
Oh, I did, but I've forgotten where that headed.
It was Summer's friend looking out and seeing Jerry beekeeping.
That was fine. That was as a one paragraph.
I kept waiting for it to
story.
Have some other, like, it didn't have to be meaningful, but just to have some connection other than beekeeping. I guess that's the connection.
That's your serial. I think because the first half of this season, when it came out last year, right, was very kind of had this overt tone of like, we get it. You guys don't like the serialization stuff very much. We're going to do one a week. Like, we're going to lean more into that. And so it's interesting to kind of hear your take on that, Brian, as in you want more of the serialization or overarching stuff. Or,
I mean, the show's called Rick and Morty. I kind of want to see them on a journey of, their big journey. And it doesn't mean every episode has to be phenomenal, but they should be well, this was the journey. They changed the order of telling, right? They plopped you into the middle of the story. And you even kind of knew that because they were showing you flashbacks. And then I think the idea was, we'll plop you in the middle of the story. We'll slowly reveal that there was more backstory. And then we'll reveal there was even more backstory. And so it'll be wider and wider. And along the way, because we're really hyper aware of the meta nature of this, we're going to continue to be being self-aware of the story. I think they like that. I bet there's people out there that like that. I don't mind it. I usually like those kind of meta things. But in this episode, they stood out. They didn't bother me, but they stood out. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is them being self-referential rather than surprising me or being woven in somehow. Am I alone in finding it a bit odd that the story as a unit seemed to find it more interesting than I did that it was a same-sex couple that were the parasites? Like, it leaned into that. Like, I'm like, why are you, am I supposed to be shocked by this? Am I, is it over the, because like they use over the line kind of graphic language, like, I want to suck on or whatever they just meandered there. They steeped in it long enough that I'm like, am I supposed to be shocked or surprised by, or I just was confused.
I didn't get that reaction myself. I thought it was the typical, like, let's take an uncomfortable moment, which is, people talking about sex when
but
you're
make
not
it between
involved.
two parasites and
The fact that it was same sex, I forgot about. Honestly, I felt like that was just a parallel of, okay, in this conformist society, this is non-conforming behavior, and that I threw kind of lost that right away, and I was more like, oh, and so now they're doing their thing that they always do, and I guess usually it's heterosexual couples, but it's like, let's talk about sex until you're uncomfortable hearing us talk about sex, because it's not a sexy thing, it's these two gross blobs of face suckers or whatever.
I would totally agree with you, except for the fact that it seemed like they teed up a big left turn of being, because he took you away from me, or because she took you away from me.
Because
was very played for surprise.
Honestly, I didn't even remember it as being same sex. More about it was they're supposed to be part of this larger unit.
Yeah.
Not to have individual feelings at all.
Well, but they also make a big deal about, like, are we allowed to do this? Who cares? Caution to the wind.
Are we sure they were same sex?
Their names were Steve and Gary or something like that. Like,
I mean, I think that,
I don't know.
That parallels that parallels the whole story of the face hugger society, right? Which is like, normally we are just reproduction, biological, process.
30-minute lifespans to produce an egg or whatever.
Yeah, and so these two that were born together at the same time and knew each other since birth, have a close connection, and then I think it's all of that just sped up, and I think it was filling in a lot of stuff, which I thought it was nice. I obviously didn't think it was weird. I thought it was kind of nice to see something like that.
I kind of liked the idea that love was the thing that destroyed this that undermined this big society.
I mean, yes, but also Rick and Morty destroyed the society.
Well, right, but
they were classy because they didn't do a 9/11.
But they wouldn't have. Let's get to that. Put a pin in that one. But it was this change that allowed them to. That was the crack that they were able to put their lever in and destroy. Yes, they destroyed. Love was the thing that allowed the society to change, that then allowed Summer to open the door for them to destroy it. That was one of the self-referential moments that worked a little better for me, was them saying, I heard the writer's room come out. And I think that's what they're trying to do. And it doesn't always work for me, but it worked here of like, dude, we can't do Twin Towers. Let's just fly around that. And then they put that conversation into the story, like Pearl Harbor, right? Like,
that was a great moment. There's no disputing that was an epic storytelling moment. Also, just to put a prophylactic around my opinion, I'm watching the show.
Why has it got to be sexual?
Prophylactic doesn't mean sexual.
It's a dam. It's a dental dam.
I am watching the show. I'm taking my 12-year-old daughter through the show. She hasn't seen all the episodes, but sort of I watch them and then I try to bring her in. So watching this one, I'm constantly hoping for another episode that I'll feel good about bringing her in to watch. One of the things I'm analyzing is, how will I explain this joke? And when it came to the lingering on that moment, I don't know how I can explain that joke outside of like, is the
9/11 joke?
No. Sorry, the relationship overly talking about sexual, sucking on or whatever. Yeah. I was like, is the joke that it's that act would be gross? Because I don't want to say that to my kid, because I don't want her thinking that, or
I'm not going to tell you how to explain it to your daughter, but I would explain the joke in general as these are two characters that were part of a society that had no love, and they decided to break all the rules and form a relationship, and then they exaggerated that relationship for comedic effect.
I think that's definitely
very
the plot.
quickly
I don't believe it's the joke. I think the joke.
I think you're assuming it's a joke also.
Yeah, no, I don't think there is a joke of them being a couple. There's a joke. The joke is in the like, because it's real, of like, hey, we came up together. We should be allowed to have feelings and not die immediately. And then the joke starts then of like, and I want to suck your face because I'm a face sucker. Get it? Ha ha ha.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if
all of a sudden I realized that I didn't get that joke until just now.
Could be part of it.
Can we suck each other's faces? Okay, now I get it.
Yeah. All right. I also think talking about some of the maybe what you felt was a lack of character depth in could be because you can very easily look at Rick and Morty's arc in this episode as I don't know, a more of a commentary or a satire, right? In terms of being so quick to rush into action and destruction, and assuming something that's big and looks like a rocket or is designed to be destroyed, and it's aimed at Earth, and oh no, they're gonna invade Earth. I almost wonder if the fact that also reads as real life commentary kind of puts some shade on, oh, well, this is also the characters kind of realizing they are also quick to aggression, and they're quick to need this output, this action, release.
Also, this episode was written by Jeff Loveness.
Okay.
It's right there in the name, Brian.
I love this.
Loveness. It's all about loveness.
And again, forgive me if I'm putting too precise a microscope on all of this stuff. It's I don't know. So far, I'm 0 for 2 for having an episode just gut punch me, and there was like a good half of the first a quarter of them so far have been truly transcendent and great, and they just haven't landed with me.
Yeah. Well, I would say my reaction to Rick and Morty this season is I'm not getting that high that you're describing, but I'm also not frustrated or throwing down my, remote control or running out of the room. It's like, okay, I got some Rick and Morty. It's, a sufficient level of Rick and Morty. But I do keep expecting them to wow me, and they haven't quite wowed me yet.
Man, that first episode this season, though, that wowed me in a big, big way.
Oh, the first episode from previously, I'm talking about this half season.
Oh, yeah, correct.
These
Sorry,
two episodes.
Yeah, season,
yeah.
Whatever.
All right, that's Rick and Morty, season 4, episode 7. Let's start talking about what we do in the shadows. We're 5 episodes in, so we're going to do a lightning round. We're going to go through all 5 episodes. We might spend a little more time on the 5th episode since it's more recent. But you guys kept talking about something that you wanted to give me.
We'll hold off on that.
We'll do it at the end of the segment.
Yeah.
I don't want to ask for presents. Okay.
No,
we'll do it at the end.
We do have a present for you.
It's your dessert.
Let's go lightning round episodes 1 through 5. We'll start with Resurrection, in which Topher is the new servant, and Guillermo is very jealous. And Guillermo also is secretly killing vampires who invade the house, unavoidably or unable to avoid his destiny as a vampire killer.
In fact, let's summarize all of them. If there's one theme that I think we're exploring in season 2 of this, is that just as in season 1, they took the insane bigness of the concept of vampirism and meshed it with the smallness of a reality show about a family and a house in Staten Island, they are expanding the circle, and every episode this season is about. And these are Justin's thoughts that I'm stealing for this summary. Instead of how does the supernatural look at the normal, the question is, how does the supernatural look at the other supernatural? And I think that that's a bold proposition, but so far they've completely pulled it off, starting with this first episode.
Lightning round. Resurrection. What do you think?
Great. They're all great. Spoiler alert. I'm going to say they're all great.
I love Guillermo, and I felt all of his jealousy when Haley Joel Osment was there, and I was very glad he was gone by the end of the episode.
Yeah, you kind of knew he was gone because you knew he had been added to the cast for the entire season. But yeah, it was a brilliant job by Haley Joel Osment doing the Topher, eternal slacker who does just enough to try to impress the boss. On to Ghosts. The vampires deduce that a ghost has invaded their home, and Nadja performs a seance to summon the ghost and discovers it is the spirit of her former lover, Jeff/Gregor.
If there's anything to ding this on, I mean, they're all great, spoiler alert, but if there's anything to ding this on, it's that there's 2 things that are set up but not paid off and don't pay off for many, at least 3 episodes to come. The Gregor ghost thing, who has unfinished business, and the other copy of Nadja that inhabits a doll that clearly has the hots for Gregor. Like, we all kind of see where this is headed.
Yeah.
And I like the device of having their ghosts show up to help them because they're dead.
I did like
so
that.
They have ghosts.
Yeah.
And also the whole running gag of Updog. It's actually Bonnie was I don't know about upset. She was bummed because she's like, but Penny loves that Updog joke. And I'm like, that's the point. The joke is not the bad guy. Like, it's acknowledge that that's such a good joke, anyone can tell it, and the joke is that this very good joke, everybody refuses to take the bait, including my favorite scene of this entire episode when Nandor is crying and Colin Robinson says, "You look like you could use some Updog," and he responds with, "Can we get some now?"
Also, the vampires not believing in ghosts is the best premise, I think, of the season so far. Spoiler
It gets
alert,
into that
right.
theme that you were mentioning of the supernatural evaluating the supernatural. Right?
Yeah.
All right, talk about episode 3, Brain Scramblies, the Super Bowl party or Superb Owl party.
This was the one. My 16-year-old doesn't like creepy and gross stuff, so she sort of tapped out halfway through season 1. But the pitch of no, it's all supernatural on supernatural action, and boy, did she lose it when she figured out what they were talking about with the Superb Owl. Like, it
really?
was great. She was cackling. It was awesome.
I thought, oh, this is like a thing. Like everyone, Superb Owl, and like you're gonna go, and it's gonna be a real thing. And no, it's just a Super Bowl. It was a great sort of double red herring on that.
Yeah, and this is going back to the season 1 of like, how do the vampires react to regular society, right? To the point of they have to consider whether they should kill or double hypnotize this guy. They end up seemingly improving his life, is the implication. And the B story is Guillermo searching for virgins for the masters and finding a group of vampire hunters,
including Daryl from The Office. Was so happy to see him. That was amazing.
All right, episode 4, The Curse. This is the email. Again, another like dealing with the real world. They get an email, a chain email that threatens to curse them if they don't forward it to 10 more people.
Unexpected fortunes.
Mailer demon.
Get out of the house, you're going to die.
Oh, that's right. Bloody Mary.
What I love is that Guillermo knows that they're going to a house, and he sees the map, which either means maybe they didn't know where it was, or he looked at the map and doesn't know where the house. I thought it was a very weird thing for there to be a map in there, and then to say like, oh, I got it wrong.
I got the idea that it was just a general like, oh no, that's pretty much where our house is.
That's
that
our
must be where we're
neighborhood.
headed.
Yeah.
And so that to him is the double surprise that in their very neighborhood, maybe a street or two over, was a freaking giant den. And it wasn't until the second time that I watched this episode. Did you guys pick up on the whole disco thread of that house?
It was like a cult or something, like a culty sort of thing.
It was like a 70s disco sex cult.
It was all vampires trapped in the 70s, and in fact, at some point, somebody knocks something and disco music is playing, and all the clothes and everything. I totally missed that the first time.
Also, I just realized in this lightning round that we get Guillermo and the vampire killing. Let's see, vampire hunters, I guess, in every episode but the next one. So Colin's promotion, we don't have anything. So I'm assuming we're going to have, because that obviously is a hilarious thing, is that Guillermo just can't avoid his destiny as a Van Helsing to become a vampire hunter. And they've been playing with that. So we don't get that in episode 5, the most recent episode, Colin's promotion. But what we do get is a lot more look at what an energy vampire does and his fate should he get a promotion.
Man, that moment that he runs his hands over his head and suddenly there's a full head of hair and then he's flying and everything.
He's like kind of flying, but he's going like a foot at a time. It's cool to see like a new facet of his powers as well, where it's not just boring people out of their energy, but like intimidating them and kind of having an authoritative sort of taking of energy.
I'll tell you what this reminds me of. Tom, do you, geez, this must have been like 10 years ago. Do you remember there was like some prankster that was going around to local news outlets pretending that he was like a yo-yo master, but he clearly had no yo-yo skills. Kenny Strasser was, and he did like K Strass, the yo-yo guy. Do you remember that?
It rings a very vague bell, but I don't remember much about it.
Basically, he would book himself as a yo-yo master and then just waste everyone's time. For reasons that are related to Justin Robert Young, I came across this supercut of all of this guy's greatest hits. Take a look. K-Stress.
It's interesting.
My parents live in Denver. They just got divorced. My dad is now in Oshkosh. And honestly, I'm just going all around. I have a brother in Portland who I don't get along with very well.
Live on TV.
Because of his wife. I'm not going to go. It's my dad. Hi.
We're dealing with some issues this morning,
Yep.
so we will
Love you.
actually just head that back to Jeff and Bow, and we'll be joining you a bit more with some of these yo-yo tricks coming up.
This dude has been doing Colin Robinson for 10 years as a
that-
real-life Borat.
That's
Is
him.
that Colin?
That's
Like,
Colin
that is
Robinson.
Colin.
It's
Yes.
him.
Like, look at any of it. And what's great is, like, when this came out, the joke was always like, the joke is he's not good at yo-yo. But now that we've seen Colin Robinson, the joke is the 3 minutes he wastes before you find out
Yes.
that he's no good at yo-yo.
He's an energy vampire.
It's
that's
so good.
incredible. That is so good. Thank you for that gift. I appreciate it.
Look up K-Strass supercut, and you can find it.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, I didn't think I was going to like this episode as much because I liked the Colin joke, but a lot of the Colin scenes have been some of my like, oh, okay, that's kind of funny. This was genius. I enjoyed it so much. I ever since they introduced an energy vampire, I've been a little skeptical that they can keep it going, and I've been wrong. They've turned Colin into a gem, just like the other vampires.
Part of that is the genius writing where they dodge the potholes. Like, for example, in the Ghost episode, when they were like, well, what about Colin? Is he alive or dead? And then they just shut that off by him saying like, yeah, I don't really know what my deal is. Anyway, it's like, that's all we needed.
Yeah, I don't know. Also, the B plot was kind of in service of Colin's plot. To be honest, it was just meant to be a background for him to show his rising power and provide the motivation for him not to care because they're so concerned about the art against him, and that makes him angry. But the B plot was Nadia discovering that Nandor pillaged the village she grew up in before she was born.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That'd be a fine plot in any other episode, but this one next
you know
to
what?
the supernova of the A plot.
they didn't give it too much time. They didn't spend too much time on that B plot. They used it to service the stronger plot. So
And a nice like emotional friends ending. Like we don't tend to get the kind of warm and fuzzy endings very often on this show. I thought it was kind of nice for everyone to be like, oh yeah, no, Colin Robinson, we like you. And
yeah. Well, and him to realize like, well, I can have ultimate power, but I'll be even lonelier. So yeah. All right. That is What We Do in the Shadows, episodes 1 through 5 of season 2. Let's talk about the Larry Sanders Show, episodes 1 and 2 of season 4. Can you believe we're in season 4? Wow.
That is fast. I can't believe how fast we're moving through these.
I mean, we are watching 2 episodes, but even then, it doesn't feel like it. So we had wondered about Roseanne's return, and we got Roseanne's return in the episode called Roseanne's Return. And the shtick was that he had proposed marriage. They'd been engaged, and then he caught her cheating on him with his chauffeur, and they'd fallen apart, and they hadn't talked to each other. And they booked Roseanne on the show without telling him, and he was trying to cancel her, but she caught on to it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, this was more stuff that was deeply shaded by the fact that she was still America's mom at that point. Like it was a continuation of the same joke, and not as much as in the first half, but in the second half, it definitely continued the weirdness, knowing how her story has progressed.
Well, what I noticed in this episode particularly was Roseanne kind of going off the rails here and there, and reminding me that was a cute thing that she did. Right. It was like, oh, she's, like you say, America's mom, and she's a little raunchy sometimes. Right. And that's what made her different and cool. And in the light of 2020, you look at it and like, oh, that's the real Roseanne poking through.
Yeah, or at least the real publicly presented version,
or the Roseanne
of,
that we've gotten now.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
That's
as we perceive it. Yeah.
Also, like they make a very big point. I mean, this ties into the B plot, but deep in the shade of the OJ trial. That was
great.
Right.
Like they spend an inordinate amount of time of showing us Larry watching the OJ trial.
Yeah.
And man, oh man, how wild does that look now that we have like OJ Made in America and the science appears to be pretty much settled on that one. but at the time, the science was far from settled. And to see his fascination would have been deeply understandable. But man, you're right. It looks very different nowadays.
Well, and then the whole thing with Phil and Hank, and Phil egging Hank's car to kind of make a point. That was interesting
great.
too.
That
you have all the evidence, but
yeah, exactly. Well, that to me is the unsung hero of this episode. I actually think, in fact, I'm sad that I forgot about that part. I'm sad that we've talked about Roseanne at all. Like that whole thing being a trap to say to America, freaking, you're going to look me in the eye and tell me that OJ didn't do it. Like that was progressive and ahead of its time before Norm Macdonald was saying it on SNL. It was amazing.
Well, and the one thing that they didn't deal with and would have been more appropriate for them to deal with back then, when like you say, less was known, was the racial aspect of it. They didn't talk about the fact that, here we go again with everyone believing a black man is guilty. And that was a huge part of this, and just got swept under the rug.
Oh, that's interesting.
Not only in Larry Sanders Show.
Is that a mark of incompleteness or a mark of bravery or what?
No, it's not a mark of bravery. It's that the mainstream take was the one you saw in the Larry Sanders Show. It's a mark of, a lack of paying attention to the black community, which was not unique to Larry Sanders Show at the time.
Yeah, I suppose that's one thing that the Hulu documentary did really, really well was remind us of the context of that time. They spent a good 3 hours leading up to just how pregnant that moment was in racial tensions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and how different the perspectives were depending on who you were and where you grew up and what your skin color was.
And I guess that's an accurate reflection of the time that Larry Sanders would be totally ignorant, or the audience, Larry Sanders the show would be totally blind to that.
The other episode was Hank's new assistant. This is where we finally acknowledge that Doucette has left the show by pretending she's on vacation and then saying she ran off with a guru. And Hank has a temp assistant who then becomes a permanent assistant, played by the wonderful Scott Thompson from Kids in the Hall.
Yeah, I don't think this aged very well because the joke appears to be he's gay. Hank's uncomfortable with him being gay, but he's good. So Hank is going to swallow his pride and deal with his new gay assistant.
But I think confronting that conflict was
progressive
good.
At the time.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I mean, it would be one thing if the joke stopped at the new assistant getting fired.
Guy. Yeah,
got
you're
rid of
right.
that guy. Yeah. But or like Hank is scared of, like, he keeps him on and he's scared of him. Like I think the fact that they kind of resolve it pretty plainly is fine. Is aged better than that. I think this is the second instance of the Larry Sanders Show using the F slur. This time by Hank and not by a queer character. That was much more of the time.
That was the part that didn't.
That was more of the time.
Man, that's so funny because like I don't even remember that, but now I totally believe you.
Yeah.
That's interesting. What did you think, Tom?
Well, I think this aged very well in the sense that it happened in 1995, right? Like a person like Hank using the F word in 1995, totally believable. And if this was, a more realistic documentary style show that was just showing what life was like, I would be like, yeah, no, that's probably right. And in a sense, Larry Sanders Show is trying to mimic reality. And I think that's why you get it written that way. I don't think they would write it that way without calling more attention to the fact that they knew that Hank shouldn't be saying that if they were to write it today. there would be more of a like, come on, Hank, get with the times. You can't say that sort of situation. And I think that's what stuck out, is that it just passes by as regular dialogue, to the point, Brian, that you didn't even notice it. But I think the situation, again, we wouldn't have that situation today in the same way, right? There'd be more people going, what is your deal? But for 1995, this is surprisingly closer to 2020 in the reaction of the people in the office to Hank. And I think it does end up, in a very awkward way, bringing Hank into the present, bringing him into the future, saying like, really, that doesn't matter. And I like the fact that they never had Scott Thompson's, Brian, apologize for who he was. And I think that was an important thing to underline in this episode.
Yeah, I wonder how much of my reaction has to do with me couching it in terms of where I was at that time. I was 2 or 3 years into college. So, obviously you go to college, you encounter a whole group of people that you'd never encountered before. And so, at that point, I had so many gay friends that it's hard for me to even think of 1995 as a time where, for me, that would have been an interesting,
Well, you would have been one of the people in the office looking at Hank going, what is your problem? What is the big deal?
Right. But
absolutely.
Because Hank is older and is kind of stuck in even older values than just given his
He's not only older values, but he's also always the worst morality. He's the worst version of his age group in every situation, right? Sexism, ageism, everything. Like he is morally bankrupt as a person.
It's so interesting to me that the F slur totally escaped my memory. Like, that felt so of the time that came and went without me really noticing it much. I'm like, well, yeah, that's accurate to 1995. But the very idea of being horrified of a gay man being your assistant was offensive to me, because I was like, well, by 1995, I was beyond that, And why are they acting, why are they not beyond that?
Rest assured, Brian, none of us look at you and go like, he's kind of like Hank. That has never happened. So you don't need to worry about that.
Also, Larry is the B plot this week, or it's kind of like they're kind of equal weight with the Dana Carvey impression. Kind of a one-note joke, which I guess it's good that it was in the B plot, because it's just Larry again not wanting to say he doesn't like something.
Yeah, it's showing Larry insecurity, which isn't new at this point, and giving Dana Carvey a chance to show off. That's kind of where I stood with it.
Yeah,
and Dana Carvey's pretty amazing. Like, we see him do a bunch of different impressions throughout this episode.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for me to reconcile the fact that Larry Sanders is one of the 4 faces on Mount Rushmore of late night television in this moment, and yet somehow has paper thin ego and can't handle seeing an impression of himself. That was a little bit harder for me to reconcile.
I just, knowing as many things that are drawn from real life that I know about,
I take it all back. All of a sudden,
I wonder,
I'm recontextualizing, and Your Honor, I would like to withdraw my objection.
I'm not saying who or what. But all right, folks. That is the Larry Sanders Show, Season 4, Episodes 1 and 2. Thank you all for supporting us on Patreon, patreon.com/Cordkillers. That gets you these episodes early. It gets you the full, whole run of Spoilerin time without being broken up. And next week, we will be talking about more Rick and Morty, What We Do in the Shadows, and Larry Sanders Show. Join us then. Until then, stay spoiled.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.